тяжестью дней. Небесный пастух пасет облака. Город стреляет в ночь дробью огней. Но ночь сильней, ее власть велика. Тем, кто ложится спать, спокойного сна. Спокойная ночь. Тем, кто ложится спать, спокойного сна. Спокойная ночь. Я ждал это время, и вот это время пришло. Те, кто молчал, перестали молчать. Те, кому нечего ждать, садятся в седло. Их не догнать, уже не догнать. А тем, кто ложится спать, спокойного сна. Спокойная ночь. Тем, кто ложится спать, спокойного сна. Спокойная ночь. Соседи приходят, им слышится стук копыт. Мешает уснуть, тревожит их сон. Те, кому нечего ждать, отправляются в путь. Те, кто спасен, те, кто спасен.
Hey, good afternoon. Welcome to the Black Ibis Social Club. How you guys doing? In the chat, I see everybody's kind of pouring in. Phisto, what's up?
Hey, what's happening, man?
Long week, interesting week. We'll see how
Yeah.
things go. Hey, for you guys right now, today is going to be a kind of a focused episode. Usually we go on tangents, or we're probably going to go on tangents, right? But it's going to be a more focused episode. We're going to be talking about a specific book we've just recently read. Fantastic book. Before we get into that, I want to kind of go over some stuff from last week. So if you listened to last week's episode, whether it was live or in the follow-up, which I'm sorry, guys, it was kind of late this time around. It was kind of a downer one. It was kind of a negative one. There were some negative elements to it, I think. And I would like to say that a lot of those issues that I had last week were resolved in real life. I mean, if you would have gathered that I was wrestling with some on how to approach a certain topic, and I thought about it, prayed on it, approached it properly. I believe there was some resolution, at least temporary, and I'm pretty happy with the way it was. But there was two things that kind of stuck out to me. I was in altercation and in positive critique by different people. Some things were mentioned to me. The first one, somebody called me an extremist. right? For
Really?
my
Wow.
views, right? I have never, I mean, I've been called all sorts of things, volcano god worshiper, a liberal, a faggot, a Nazi, all the things
Extreme
online.
faggot.
Extreme
Yeah.
faggot, right? All the above I've been called on the internet, but I've never been called an extremist in real life before. Like somebody like actually in a vitrolic way just called me an extremist. And I was like, whoa. And then I thought
Interesting.
about it. And my reply to this person, like, yes, I am an extremist. Okay. I'm an extremist because I take my daughter to church every Sunday. I'm an extremist because I pray before dinner with my family. I'm an extremist because I pray every night before bed with my kid. I'm an extremist because I believe in the family and I believe that women are women and men are men. And I believe that family is the ideal social, cohesive unit of all civilization. I'm an extremist because I believe that Christ is Lord. And in 2025, if you believe any of that stuff, you're an extremist. Okay. If you believe anything that the machine is against, you're an extremist. So yeah, I'm an extremist, and
Really? So
I'll
so so you were deemed an extremist for those views? Really?
eh,
Those things?
maybe some other ones, but that's kind of
Maybe some other things?
the baseline.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Things that naturally grow out of normal human views that were
right.
normal
It
until 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, I never thought of myself as an extremist. I've jokingly thought of myself as extremist, but I've come to the realization that yeah, you know what? We're extremists. If you're listening to this podcast, if you're sitting here talking to us, you're an extremist, bros. Like, welcome to the club. Or extremism adjacent. All right. So ultimately, yeah, they were right. Now, the other thing, the same person that called me an extremist also called me dark, which I laugh about this. But then a person I highly respect and is basically the person I look to for guidance also pointed out that I tend to, in our last episode, for example, um, that we tend to have a almost nihilistic outlook on life sometimes, or that we think that the world is dark. And he pointed out, and this person I respect beyond all levels of respect, all right, pointed out that the world is created by God and it is beautiful. And yes, there's a layer of mud on top of it that our sin puts onto it, but we should look beyond that and we should look at the greatness in the world. And I thought about that a lot, and I realized that yeah, he's right. I do have a sadly dark nihilistic outlook often. I have a tendency, if I had one sin that defies me in a way as my worst one that I have to work on, is my slip into nihilism, my slip into anger and rejection of the world. And it made me think a lot all week because my own mom, in arguments with her, pointed out that I am a very cruel person. All right. Like I can't deny it. I have a tendency to Raskolnikov my way through life and look at the world you know, in a very nihilistic kind of way and be cruel because of that and be analytic and in a way materialist in my thinking. And in arguments, I will get into arguments and I will be unnecessary cruel for no reason. And you guys have probably seen if you followed me on the internet, I tend to go for the jugular when it comes to insults and arguments, right? You've seen me, Fisto, right? Like
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
not I'm not jokeful. Sometimes I'll be unwantonly cruel, and I don't even realize that. And I realize that's not a good thing. It's a symptom of my kind of despair, if that makes sense, right? I guess it's my rejection of the machine or my reaction against the machine, right? But it's a negative reaction, and I'm going to work on that. So one thing I want to point out in kind of an answer to that criticism of myself is that yeah, I I don't really believe that. I don't believe that the world is dark and evil because I don't because I I have my daughter, and I knew that the world wasn't all dark and evil when I first met her, the day she was born. And I have
Uh-huh.
my wife, and I know love, and I know great joy, and I've seen, sunrise over beautiful forests, and I've been, just in beautiful places, and I've seen extreme acts of human kindness that break through all the muck, right? And I think maybe because those tend to be so obscured in our world that I forget sometimes through all the mud and the muck. And I always think to myself, I had a conversation with my wife last night that because we have the compared to like the saints living back in the day, right? We are exposed through our cell phones, through the internet, through the media. We're exposed to insurmountable amount of human suffering. Like right now, we can open our phones, or I can just tab through this browser, and I can just witness human suffering unwitnessed by anybody in the past history, right? And that messes you up, man. That messes you up, right? And what's terrible in a way about our culture and our kind of our panopticon of social media, for example, is that while that's suffering, the police violence, cops punching people, all that kind of stuff, rioters, crimes, just wanton acts of just disgusting chimp outs and all sorts of stuff like that. What never gets captured or rarely gets captured is like just the beautiful things in the world. That becomes so rare, and the algorithm almost, I mean, it probably purposely like hides it from us, right? Nobody pulls out their cell phone when, like, this is what I tell my wife. Like, recently, we were at a supermarket, and there was a homeless person, and she asked him if he needed food. She went inside, got him some food, gave it to him. Right? Nobody pulled out their cell phone to like Instagram that, and not that we should, but like you don't see that. You don't see those acts of kindness. You don't see, people getting into car accidents and like being kind to each other and helpful. You don't see any of that. When my wife hit a deer and our car was totaled, the cop came, and he gave my daughter a stuffed animal and hung out with her while the car was being towed. Nobody takes pictures of that stuff. They take pictures and videos of the worst of humanity, right? So when we live on the internet, we get skewed by like the misery, and it is like John Basalia said, the internet is an instant shit colored glasses, and that's what we get. And it becomes very easy to slip into a nihilistic view of the world. And I think, as we will see in our conversation today, I think that's the intention, right? That is the intention of the machine, to constantly divide us, to constantly make, you know, a negative view of the world. All right. So let us start. And this episode, unlike usual episodes, which are just kind of conversation, we'll have more of a focus. We're going to be talking about Paul Kingsnorth's recent book, Against the Machine, right? And
Yes.
and let me kind of preface this book before, right? Now, oftentimes the Black Ibis project, I guess, my project along with Phisto's project, and my essays and Phisto's essays, and kind of my life project of writing and reading and having these conversations, it's an ongoing, it's a learning experience. If you listen to episodes from Black Ibis from the Dicenius review era, season 1, you're gonna see a growth in both mine and Phisto's kind of development. And we're not that much different than we were before, but a lot of our ideas have solidified and become much more coherent and have adapted to the ever-changing landscape. But what's interesting is, because this is a journey, right? We're on a journey of, discovering truth, I guess, right? A journey of uh, finding the goal, or trying to find a solution to our problems. Occasionally, we'll come across somebody or an idea, a fellow traveler, to use that terminology, that that just gets it, right? And in this case, coming across Paul Kingsnorth's book, Against the Machine, you're like, dude, everything we've been talking about has been so well put together into this book
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I'm almost ashamed that I wasn't able to write it and I haven't written it. It's almost like he is a traveler ahead of us by maybe 5 years, right? Because reading the book, a lot of the stuff, like, I'm going to kind of skip ahead. There's a lot of references, and I've read almost all the references, and everything. I'm like, yeah, yep, that's right, and he puts it so well. Anyway, so what is Against the Machine, and who is Paul Kingsnorth? Paul Kingsnorth is a English writer who currently lives in Ireland. He is actually a novelist, and he originally kind of came on the scene because of a novel he wrote called The Wake. And interestingly enough, I came across The Wake a few years ago, and I never read it. It's been sitting in my Amazon to buy, like like the little folder or whatever, for many, many years. I never got around to it. I don't know why. I have no idea why. And I've always, and this is probably why, he's been known as an environmentalist. He was a kind of a lefty environmentalist in the 2000s or so. And he eventually kind of went from being on the left to more like being on the right, or kind of where we're at, because I'm, like I said, I always say that I'm not of the right, or I'm not a conservative in any way, shape, or form. And along the way, very similar to our journey, in my case, a return to, in your case, a discovery of, he converted to orthodoxy in the last 5 years. So he went from being a environmental leftist to actually a Wiccan occultist for a while. And when that was a spiritual dead end, and his reasoning and logic came to the conclusion, he ended up finding the Orthodox Church, and he converted to the Romanian Orthodox Church in Ireland maybe 5 years ago, if I read his biography correctly. And then he basically put down all his ideas in this book called Against the Machine. And let me tell you guys, and this is not hyperbole in any way, shape, or form. It is one of the most important books I've ever read on the topic of contemporary spiritual, political, and cultural topics. It is outstanding. All right. It is basically, in my opinion, it is akin to Ernst Jünger Forest Passage mixed with Umaswil, mixed with C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity, all in one. And it is, I hope, the beginning of a movement towards a proper countercultural response to what he terms the machine, or in reality, we can actually call the Antichrist. All right. So, anyways, Phisto, what do you think?
It's the book I have been waiting to read my entire life. That's about all I can say. No, I believe your comparisons to those other fine volumes is very, very, very good. I laughed very hard at one point when Kingsnorth literally, well, not literally, but he alludes to the anarch. I don't know. I presume he's read Younger, and I presume he's probably been exposed to those ideas. And yeah, he alludes to it. Talks about the kinds of people who can slip inside the cracks of the machine, which is what the anarch is all about, which is, I think, what Younger was trying to explore in that book. However, it does Against the Machine does something that Umaswil did not. For those of you who haven't read Umaswil, I'm about to spoil it, but the protagonist, so to speak, after discussing his life in this post-apocalyptic city-state, joins up with the leader of said city-state, and they go out on safari into the deep heart of Africa, never to return. And it's kind of a bittersweet end. I believe it's almost kind of the faults of the anarch, or the faults of his personality, specifically the character specifically, leads him to this end, and he doesn't know what he left behind. He doesn't realize, as his brother comments when discovering his papers, he didn't know we loved him, I think, is close to what he says. Now, whether or not that's true, whatever, so on and so forth, the end of Umaswil is, just do what you should do, or do what you want to do as you will, There's really no other point to anything, and I'm going to go hunt lions in Africa and die. It's a very kind of like, okay. Against the Machine, on the other hand, takes the Anarch and provides a target for the Anarch, provides an actual goal for the Anarch that is not self-destruction, essentially. And it points towards the garden. It points back towards the kingdom of God. So I thought, having read Ibis last year, it basically set the stage for this one. Funny how that works, right?
Right. Absolutely.
I also think that you could say, if you were to really structure this book compared to those other books, I think it's much, much, much better to say that it is a mere Christianity for the 21st century, because it's going to get you in the train station, and it's going to get you in the train station by discussing the unique problems that we deal with in 2025, things that C.S. Lewis foresaw in That Hideous Strength, but could not, name specifically. So it's kind of like a more, it's a much more accurate map, I should say. And then Forest Passage and Ibis would obviously be excellent companion pieces. If you wanted to make a class out of these 4 books, I think you would do very, very well to do so. But yeah, it's, like I said, it's the book I've been waiting my entire life to read. Ever since I was a young boy, I felt that there was deep problems in the world, among my family, among my friends, among everybody. And I couldn't quite ever put my finger on it.
Right.
And, for example, the big divide in my family. I'm kind of I don't talk about my family all that much, because I keep the private. But in this case, I'll reveal a little something. I'm kind of a black sheep in my family, and it comes from the fact that my father worked his whole life for a single company, one of the major U.S. auto manufacturers. Got a job straight out of high school, went to school, did his 40, 50 years, got the watch, bailed out, and now he's remaining retired until whatever happens, right? And I've always felt a deep-seated revulsion at that, because he spent his life plugged into the machine. He spent his life literally plugged into machines. His job as an industrial engineer was trying to figure out how to have men better interact with their machines. You know what I mean? And for me, it's
Right.
just it makes me want to vomit. I've never wanted to do that. And I mean, I love him, right? Like, we've buried the hatchet on this issue. But it's, the desire to run away from that has brought my life and put my life in the trajectory that it's got. And in a lot of ways, that revulsion, that desire to flee, has brought me back to some semblance of rootedness, some resemblance of stability. After I read the book, I did a little bit more family research, and I found that, in a way, I've gone back to what my family did when they first got to the New World, living in a small town. I come from a long line of teachers, merchants, shopkeepers, soldiers, pastors, preachers, like just middle America Puritan people. You know what I mean? And
Right.
I've gotten back to that, or at least a echo of it at worst. And at best, I think I'm exactly where I need to be. And it's also interesting that, I've sort of just accepted the fact that I'm a bit of a Puritan. I've always kind of been that way, where I have my views and I have my positions, and, shut up, retard jokes aside, shut up, retard. It's a very Puritan thing to say, isn't it? Like, you're just wrong. Shut up, go away. Like, and there's no discussion. Because we're a hard-headed bunch of people. You know what I mean? But like you said, I'm checking out the Orthodox Church, and we've had, excellent discussions, and at least I've been brought back around to something that sort of mellows out the harsh edges,
Right.
if you will.
Right.
So anyway, all of that is to say, again, it's the book I've been waiting to read my entire life,
Right.
because
So
it's just made so much. It's made so much.
So
Clear
what?
that was
So
not
what
clear before.
exactly? Yeah, absolutely. It is the book that I think should be our, in a way, it should be. There've been some great books in the last 20 years, right? I would say maybe even the last 30 years that us on our side of the the I'd say the political divide, the cultural divide, right, can look at. I mean, there's outstanding work by Christopher Lash. There's Baudrillard's stuff. There's so much good stuff out there, but a lot of it doesn't combine all that stuff. And this book manages to combine Rene Guénon, Christopher Lash, Baudrillard, and just everything all into one. And it does a lot
Yeah.
of descriptive, but it also has a lot of prescripting thing. Now, so what is the
Marshall
book? Let's
McLuhan's
start.
in
Let's start with
there.
some
Like, it's got everybody. It's
right.
crazy.
Marshall,
He brought up the
everything we've
McLuhan's
ever
and then
talked about.
yeah, when he brought up when he tied in McLuhan and then into McGilchrist, I was like, holy shit, this is great.
Right.
Alex is gonna lose his mind on.
Well, it's
on
like
this one.
you got Rene Guénon in there. You got everything,
Yeah.
like everything we've talked about and we've gone over on this podcast. It's all in one book. It's almost like, just I look at my library. I'm like, oh, look, it's everything I've been reading for the last decade. Now, so
Yeah.
for you listeners, what is this book about? Before I'm gonna do some spoilering. Remember, this is a nonfiction book, so there's not a lot of spoiler you can make it. I'm gonna leave some key elements out because I highly recommend everybody that listens to this podcast read this. Right? I have a feeling that we're gonna be talking about this book for a long time, and I think that it's gonna inspire further work along these lines. From a like I would say, I don't know, a fourth position maybe, but the true position. But how does the book open? And right away I knew that this was going to be a banger when the first few pages are about Lord of the Rings. And one line that like caught me and I highlighted it right away was I quote, "If you have the kind of sensibility which prefers Lothlorien to Isengard, this means that you are a character in a tragedy rather than a heroic epic. Most of the things you like are fading away." Right. And I was like, ugh, okay, yeah. Yeah, I get it. I see it. Right. And so what are we talking about here? What is the machine? What are we talking about completely? Right. And before we go into what is most the machine is, one of the things that I love about this book, and it synthesizes something that I've had a problem with fully explaining myself. Maybe I have, I think if you've listened to me talk over the last years, I've pointed this out, right? Is that I am not a man of the left and I'm not a man of the right. And what I mean by that is if you listen to me talk and my political or cultural ideas, I can often come off as being a leftist because you know what? There are a lot of leftist prescriptive ideas that I fully embrace. For example, environmentalism. I am a proud environmentalist. I think that the environment, nature, our wildlands, our lakes, our oceans are absolutely critical to protect and to save, right? We are basically commanded by God. Adam was commanded by God to have dominion over the land, over the animals, over everything, right?
Right.
And I have been an anti-conservative when it comes to this. Nothing disgusts me more than the right wing, and I'm using bunny ears, like my daughter likes to say. She goes, "Bunny ears, Dad." I'm using bunny ears here. The right wing's aversion to protecting the environment. Like, for example, if you remember a few years ago, there was those laws where, like, for example, I fully support getting rid of plastic bags. All right. We do not need to have tons and tons of plastic bags for convenience, right? I fully support that Starbucks doesn't hand out plastic straws anymore and they give you like whatever paper straws, or you know what? Drink it out of the sippy cup. Okay. I never use straws at any of the places I use. I drink out of the cup because I'm a man and men don't drink through straws. Men drink out of a cup. All right. You can drink your coffee out of a cup. All right. You don't need a straw for your, first of all, you shouldn't be drinking any, if your coffee comes through a straw, it's not coffee, my man. Okay. I'm sorry to say that. Right. But anyways, You can go to the ocean. You can go to any of the coasts, whether it's South Carolina or California and Malibu or Santa Monica, and you can see just endless pieces of crap and plastic all over the place. Right? That's disgusting. That is a failure of on us as Christians. The fact that our earth is filled with absolute disgusting consumerist plastic is absolutely obscene. It is a mockery of the gifts God has given us, right? But of course, that's minor because the majority of it comes not from us, but from our consumption of worldwide consumerism and the endless monstrosities of like plastic that are produced in third world countries and China and flood. Does every little piece of food we get need to come with a plastic toy? Does everything need to come in plastic bags? Absolutely not, right? So I'm a hard environmentalist when it comes to that kind of stuff, right? And I lament the fact that the right, once again, bunny quotes, right, has given up that battlefield to our enemies, right? And has allowed the left to kind of dominate the discussion about environmentalism and protecting the nature. Because you know what? The left is a servant of the machine, and they want nothing but to make us live in like eternal, cyber cities, right? So the fact that we're not even protecting our God-given nature and our God-given earth because we would rather sip our coffee through a straw is a disgusting black mark upon anybody that calls themselves a conservative. Because if you can't conserve the earth, you're not conserving anything, my man, right? So I've always had that leaning, and I've also been, an anti-capitalist, right? I feel like wanton corporatist capitalism of multinational ways is just outright disgusting, right? I don't want Starbuckses from Tokyo to Shanghai to Berlin to Bucharest, right? I want individual localized businesses. I prefer small stuff. So I've always had a soft spot for that kind of anti-globalist left that used to exist. It doesn't exist anymore. They've completely been fully destroyed. Yeah. And Brian Ranger's right. The only thing appropriate for a straw are milkshakes, maybe Slurpees, but Slurpees probably shouldn't exist anyways. Yeah, if you're drinking the Slurpee, you're basically drinking trash.
So not Jack Daniels. Is that don't drink that through a straw? Is that what we're saying?
Never should be drinking it through a straw. Okay.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm just asking for a friend.
Just put it in the recycling bin. Put it in your recycling bin, right? But so I've always had like I've had a lot of fondness for like I would say things that are coded left, right? Ideas that are left coded. And obviously I'm very conservative or right wing coded in a lot of other things, whether it's localism, some forms of nationalism, traditionalism, family, church, that type of thing, right? So I have a combination of both. And what I think that this book does very, very well is Paul Kingsnorth really merges the two and tells us in a very I can't pronounce it, in a very proper intellectual way how both of our kind of tribalistic ideals are both wrong and they're both serving the same kind of master in a way. And he describes it really well in one quote where he says that our current cultural war is two bald men fighting over a comb.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely correct. So what is the machine? What is the machine we're talking about? Well, he starts off by quoting a poem, right? A Welsh poet, R.S. Thomas, and he describes the other, right, in a verse. He says, "The machine appeared in the distance, singing to itself of money. Its song was the web they were caught in, men and women together. The villages were as flies to be sucked empty. God secreted a tear. Enough, enough, he commanded. But the machine looked at him and went on singing." And so what is this machine, right? Okay. So here in the book is broken down into 4 distinct parts, right? And the first 2 parts are describing the machine and eventually gets to the goals of the machine, right? And the spiritual goals of the machine. And what in this part, he goes into very much he plays off of and he writes off of like Rene Guénon or what's his name? The Rise and Fall of Nations. What's his name? Oh my gosh. the big right wing philosopher that wrote history.
Do you know how
Who-
little that narrows it down?
oh my gosh! All right, I'm gonna. Everybody's gonna be like,
Spengler?
Spengler, yeah,
Yeah. Spengler.
Spengler. So he goes off of
Yeah, no,
Spengler,
I
right?
was thinking about the book. I was like, wait, which one? Oh, yeah. Because he gets a little Frosty Man and the whole,
The
yeah,
Faustian
his,
man, right? So we
his
talk about the
whole,
ages. We talk
yeah,
about the ages of man, right? And
yep,
what is going on here? And what kind of the underlying like theory of everything is that all nations, all ages, are centered by a mythology or a truth, right? A belief in a transcendent truth. And we had the pagan era, and even the Faustian era, as Spengler puts it, is still centered around the truth, right? That there is a throne, and on the throne sits a God, and the God in our case, and always the case, because the true God is Christ. But modern society has dethroned that God, and in that vacuum, you cannot have a vacuum in the world, right?
yeah,
Humanity
right,
cannot have a vacuum on the throne, and has replaced God on the throne with money, basically, with the drive of the
yeah,
machine, with the drive of progress, endless, mindless progress, right? And I quote him right here early on, right? The shaky the shaky binding straps with which medieval Christendom kept the traders, the merchants, and the urban bourgeois tied down have long since broken, leaving us with no better argument against the rampant greed and inequality than against total sexual license or the remaking of the human body itself. This is what Friedrich Nietzsche knew, and what today's liberal humanists will too often deny. If you knock out the pillars of a sacred order, the universe itself would change shape. At the primal level, such a change is experienced by people as a deep and lasting trauma, whether they know it or not. No culture can just shrug off or rational away the metaphysics which underpin it and expect to remain a culture in anything but name, if that. So, what Kingsnorth is basically describing is that our modern culture and our cultural war and the West, right? And this is where I think this is where the key is, and this is what separates Kingsnorth and this book Against the Machine from all the other previous work, is that he looks at our culture today and he goes, yes, we are fighting in the trenches between, liberal degenerates and, anti-liberal frogs or whatever, or right wingers or whatever. But the truth is we're fighting for this West, but the West is dead. Right. And this is where a lot of people are going to have a hard time with this book. Okay. Because he clearly says that. He goes, the West is dead because it doesn't have a truth anymore. There's nothing there anymore. Right. Right. No hostile army swept into Europe and forcibly converted us to a rival faith. Instead, we dismantled our story from within. What replaced it was not a new sacred order, but a denial that such a thing existed at all. All right. We can rant about immigrants and Muslims coming into Europe and raping and murdering. We can rant about immigrants taking jobs in California or whatever, but it doesn't matter, right? All right. None of that stuff matters because there is no West to fight over anymore, right? Um, those people came in because he puts it really well. He says, when our goal in life is money and pleasure, how dare we get upset when people come looking for money and pleasure? You know what I mean? Right?
yeah, exactly.
Right. And it is
Money to the ass, baby. Let's go.
right.
Yeah,
Right. Like what is all that, right? So basically, what is the machine? Well, the machine is progress. It is this force that started really in the end of the Middle Ages with Enlightenment, right? With the movement towards, kind of
yeah. Well, it
Protestant.
starts.
Hmm?
Yeah, it starts with Rousseau and the whole idea of a blank slate.
Right.
It starts with the idea. It starts with the idea that humanity is just a generic cog, and you can socially, scientifically, mathematically, you know, rearrange the people into whatever combination you want. It
Right.
is, in a lot of ways, what Dr. Malcolm says in Jurassic Park. You were so busy trying to decide or trying to figure out whether you could, you never bothered to ask whether you should. And everything flows from, it is essentially looking at the world like it is a machine, looking at it scientifically, looking at it materialistically. How can we best arrange the grid? How can we best order society? How can we best structure things to serve the divine order, or in this case, the profane order, which puts money in the place of God. One thing I want to bring up, and because I like this very much, he ties it all the way back to the ancient Egyptians, where you have
Yes,
this
yes.
the top down ordering of society. But at least the Egyptians had a divine order. At least they had something outside of their society, outside of their culture, that it was all directed at. They had gods, at least. Um, the West, the West is dead because for the sake of material prosperity, we sacrificed our God, or attempted to. We sacrificed all of it. We sacrificed the divine order because we could get rich. It's really as simple as that.
Right.
Imagine money. Imagine that money does indeed grow on trees, but it was better known as the tree of knowledge, and now we're fucked. So there you go.
Right. Because what the problem is, and what we fail to in all our conversations, whether it's about feminism or transgender or LGBT stuff or race stuff, is we are arguing about ruins ultimately, right? We are, you can see this in our kind of reactionary throwbacks, like our recent pagan bros that are into paganism, and they're searching for that kind of stuff, or even in our own kind of Christian circles where we're constantly arguing about denominational arguments and that kind of stuff, where we're failing to miss the point is that there isn't probably anytime soon going to be a revival of a Deus Vult type of medieval Christian supremacy. That era is long gone and it is dead. It's been rejected by modernity, and we rejected it. We colonized ourselves first. We basically, and he focuses very much on England, and I feel really bad for England because it is one of the most deracinated societies on the planet, even more so than the United States. And
Yeah,
then he says that the initial empirical colonization came out of England, spread throughout the world, and now Europeans and Americans in turn are colonizing ourselves. Nobody invaded us. The Chinese aren't invading us. The Chinese are also a conquered people by the machine. And now we are just destroying our own culture. In the same way we destroyed the cultures of, like, the Polynesians, the Papua New Guineans, all the African nations. We destroyed their local cultures through our globalization. First it was as in a form of imperialism, and then it was in a form of a 20th century development, once again bunny quotes in that one, right?
yeah,
Now we've turned that on ourselves, and we've destroyed all the cultures of the world and turned everything into a giant Starbucks supermarket, basically. And now we have focused that eye of this machine on ourselves, and we've destroyed our own cultures, right? And he quotes, I quote again, "The modern experiment has been the act of dethroning both literal human sovereigns and the representatives of the sacred order, and replacing them with purely human and purely abstract notions, the people, or liberty, or democracy, or progress." I'm all for liberty, and it would be nice to give democracy a try one day too. But the dethroning of the sovereign, of Christ, who sat at the heart of the Western sacred order, has not led to universal equality and justice. It has led via bloody shortcut through Robespierre, Stalin, and Hitler to the complete triumph of the power of money, which has splintered our culture and our souls into a million angry shards. This has been the terrible irony of the age of reason and of the liberal and leftist theories and revolutions which resulted from it. From 1789 to 1968, every one of them ultimately failed. But in destroying the old world and its sacred order, they cleared a space for money culture to move in and commodify the ruins. The vacuum created by the collapse of our old taboos was filled with the poison gas of consumer capitalism. It has now infiltrated every aspect of our lives in the way that the Christian story once did, so much so that we barely even notice as it colonizes everything from the way we eat to the values we teach our children. Cut loose in a postmodern present with no center, no truth, no direction, we have not become independent-minded, responsible, democratic citizens in a human republic. We have become slaves to the power of money and worshipers of the self. Right? And that's rough, man, because that's the truth, right? We live in a completely corporatized, culturally manipulated world, right? Where we are consumers. Our very identities are consumer identities. If you spend any time scrolling through X or Substack notes or anything like that, it's just consumer identities, whether it's, online Christianity or the various new outcroppings of paganism. They're just consumer identities. It is identities that are created by nothing, right? And he goes on to say, a culture, I think now, is above all a spiritual creation. When the cult departs from the heart of the culture, the thing starts to fall apart. The center cannot hold. This, I think, is where we are. If this is true, then the culture war is the equivalent of two bald men fighting over a comb. We are not in an existential fight for the future of Western civilization. Western civilization is already dead, and both sides of the current war are reacting in their own particular ways to the vacuum that has replaced a vacuum which something must fill. So what are we talking about here? Basically, is that when we got rid of Christianity, right, we have given up a transcendent truth. When there is nothing to aim for, when our leaders have nothing to aim for, and there's no truth, the only thing that replaces is money, greed, avarice, right? And we live in a society which is geared on the self, and everything from there you can take down. Look at even, we criticize Egypt because Egypt is a nihilistic, necromantic culture where they would destroy the bodies of men to build tombs for its rulers, right? Its great achievements were basically tombs, right? And those tombs at least aimed for heaven, right? That was the goal. And you look at buildings throughout history, they were built to edify God, right? Some of the tallest buildings in Europe up until the modern era were cathedrals, right? That pointed towards heaven, that pointed towards truth. But what are our cathedrals? What are the tallest buildings in our cities? Our skyscrapers, what are they? They're banks, guys. Fucking banks, right? You go to downtown Los Angeles or New York and you look, and what are the skyscrapers? What was the World Trade Center? Banks, right?
Giant bank. Yep.
That tells you a lot about the culture we live in, right? That our monuments are financial institutions and our churches are museums, right? That illustrates that we live in a world of, and we live in this world that is basically created to slowly take away our freedoms. And the interesting thing is that a lot of these ideas are predicated on personal freedom. The machine tells us we're going to get freedom. If we revolt against the old ways, the old traditions, the village, we're going to get freedom. But time and time again, we have seen that is not the case. That the more technologically inclined we become, the less free we become. Can you right now, Phisto, as an American,
Yes.
right? Can you look at yourself in 2025 and say that you are more free than somebody living before the American Revolution in the American colonies?
I'm going to say no. I am not more free than my ancestors.
No, none of us are. I think that you cannot argue that we're more free, because you know what? Those guys, they could open a brewery if they wanted to, right? They could have, they could just buy a horse, they could, buy a slave if they wanted to, right? They could do all kinds of things.
Get up and move to Ohio. Get up and move to the frontier and homestead.
Right. And here we live in an endless web of industrial and governmental bureaucratic control that is run by the machine, right? Everything we do is, Yeah, we're not even as free as the indentured servants. We're less free. We're basically we cannot live in a world like technology, for example, has made us slaves. Right? I
Yeah.
sit at work and I look through my emails and email. Oh, the greatest creation ever. Remember in the 1990s, email is gonna free us from fax machines and it's gonna free us from having to go to you know to go to the mailboxes and all that kind of stuff, right? But has email freed us? Absolutely not. Right? It has made us a slave. We're inundated with more and more work. It's given us more work at home. We have more taxes. We have more regulations. We can't drive our cars without paying for the privilege of even driving our cars that we pay for, that we still don't even own because they're on loan. Every element of our lives is less free than it was 200 years ago. Every element of our lives is less free than it was 50 years ago. Every element of our lives is less free than it was a decade ago. All right. And more we have become basically, to quote that, I hate going to the stupid movie, but The Matrix, in a way, even though it was made by two hellacious, retarded shitlibs that are degenerate trans people, it was correct, right? We are
Yeah.
just basically fodder for the machine. We are the fuel that feeds the cube. And by the cube, I'm referring to the Borg, right? And what is ultimately the goal of this machine, which is ultimate transcendence of the human existence, right? I know oftentimes you and I disagree, and where we tend to disagree is we tend to disagree with space, right?
Uh-huh.
You're much more of a fan of Elon Musk than I am. I am actually.
Really?
I think he's a silly Pied Piper of stupidity,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I'd say my opinion on him waxes and wanes, but I certainly wouldn't trust him with anything.
Right.
I
I
mean,
think you're right.
I
And
mean,
I guess I don't want to
yeah,
put words in your mouth, right? But I
yeah,
think
I mean, you see, the funny thing about that too is that my own thoughts on space and my own thoughts on those sorts of things have been evolving, especially since reading this book. Uh, I started a second read through of it, and I've got 4 pages of notes from just the first chapter. And one of the thoughts I had is the universe a prison? And if it's a prison, is it a mercy that we're in prison? I mean,
right,
think about the size of this thing. I mean, if the universe is as large as it is, and it's as empty as it is, and it is what we think it is, holy shit, did we get cast out of the garden? Good lord,
right,
you know what I mean? So it's my own thoughts on the matter uh, are evolving. Because at the end of the day, like there is no environment more hostile than space. Like
right,
30 seconds, you're dead. Yeah,
right.
that kind of sounds like cast out of the garden. You know what I mean? Like, no
That's how I'm
point.
starting to feel too. I'm starting to
Yes,
feel
I mean
that.
it's trying to get back up to the garden, and you know the angels and the seraphim haven't even gotten their hands on you yet, and you're still dead in 30 seconds.
Right.
You know, woo. Okay, actually, you know what it is? It's a big damn boat between us and the garden. Like, I don't know, and but anyway, yeah. Continue. I'll certainly agree that in the past I was more sympathetic, but these days,
Right.
yeah, I don't know, man.
I think I'm becoming more and more anti-technology as I go along, and I was always skeptical of the idea of this transcending the world and following somebody into space, because ultimately it's just another
Well,
corporate entity. But I
and
think that
and 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 sorry, just to touch on it because you brought up Star Trek too, and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole per se, but once again showing that the best thing Star Trek ever came up with was the Borg, because at the end of the day, if you wish to survive in space, that is the final product. That's the only product that can survive and thrive in space. Everyone else is just playing catch up because you will eventually have to go that direction. You know what I
right,
mean? So
right,
at the end of the day, even Star Trek recognizes this is fucked. This isn't going to work in the long term.
right.
Anyway,
Well, he goes on. So he goes on to say, Paul goes on to say, we are, I think, in this flailing, dissolving West of ours, desperately in need of real culture. We want to go home again, but even when we know where home is to be found, we see that we can't return. And so a void is created. Into the void rush monsters, fake versions of the roots we are looking for, identity politics, newly rigid racial labels, extreme forms of nationalism, endless multiplying genders and identities constructed online with no reference to reality, the mono-ethnic identitarianism of the far right, or the diversity identitarianism of the far left. Take your pick according to your predilections and fears. We reach for toxic imitations of our lost roots, but they can never replace the real thing, and the result is an orgy of anger, bitterness, and wanton destruction. Meanwhile, the machine pushes on, relentless. Banger, dude. He is criticizing the culture war right there. That's what we have. We have endless people arguing about, religious denominations, paganism, blah, blah, blah on the right. And then on the left, you have endless retardations and gender and racist like ideologies, and these things are clashing, but ultimately they're just a cry for pain, right? Because they're a grasp in the dark for home, which we cannot find because we've abandoned, because we have removed Christ from our lives, right?
Yeah.
And it's
oh, sorry, finish your
it's
thought.
perfect.
Then I want
Go
to
ahead.
address something John. Yeah, I just want to address something John said. His question was, so when are we not? The current era began with Columbus, after the final defeat by Christianity of Europe and the beginning of expansionist capitalism before that. And it seems to me, and I'd like to hear what you think, but it seems to me that Kingsnorth marks the beginning of the machine, or at least the machine supercharging in earnest in 1789. And Americans will recognize that year, or at least you should. You would if you passed my government class. That's when the U.S. Constitution was ratified. And the fundamental problem with that, and Americans are going to have to reckon with this, republics are profane. They do not direct the people to any higher purpose. I don't really think they can. And so, that's kind of when all this really, like I said, supercharged and began to remake the world, because you had a massive country on this side of the globe that decided to press forward without a king. And it's not so much that we pressed forward without a king, it's that we pressed forward without any higher ideal beyond our own prosperity.
Right.
And here we are, we have endless cathedrals to the banks,
Right.
and part of it, the founding fathers, we revere them. I mean, gosh, we even have that phrase, the founding fathers, right? And I think those men would even be persuaded by what we're talking about now. I think you could sit any of those guys down and go, check this out, guys. They studied history and they'd realize, son of a bitch,
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know, but I think that's something that we're going to have to reckon with. And I like John's question because, Kingsnorth keeps bringing up 1789 throughout the book, but he never talks about the Constitution. But everybody knows that's what happened in 1789, right? I mean, there aren't any other major events or any other major things that would mark that year, right? Or am I wrong?
Right.
Am I forgetting?
I mean, I think you're right. I think that the machine itself, I think that America as an idea is a child of the machine, undeniably so, right? But
yeah, I mean, it strikes me that London was the blueprint, like he says in the book. London was the first world city, the first cosmopolitan, truly modern cosmopolitan city, and the United States, especially with the Constitution, it really just removed any barriers for creating world cities. And as everybody knows, the British Empire eventually just went west and is now centered in Washington and New York. And London
right.
is now a colony. Old England is now a vassal of, it's still it's the same machine that you can trace all the way through. It's just now England, or at least the bit of land known as England, is a vassal now.
Right. There is no escaping the
It is
machine.
what it is.
It's everywhere. It's everywhere.
Yeah, right.
And
Yeah.
I think if we're looking at where does the machine come from, I think the machine's always been with us, right? I think the machine lived in the garden, and I think the machine is what drove Eve to take a bite of the apple. I mean, not only do I think that, but the priests of the machine itself, the worshipers of the machine, like Steve Jobs, I mean, there's a reason why he made the logo of his company, right? A bitten apple. All right. It's not a reference to scholastic education, guys. All right. That is a biblical reference that you have on your cell phone. If you own an Apple phone and you look on the back of it, your Apple logo, right, there is an apple with a bite taken out of it. And it's not referencing giving a teacher an apple like from the 20th century. It's referencing the garden, guys. Okay. And if you doubt that, if you think that that's a silly superstition on my part, right? And this is a Jewish Buddhist, by the way, Steve Jobs, right? Go ahead and Google the picture of young Steve Jobs in his office when he was creating the iMac, right? And when he was creating the Apple, right? And you'll see a picture of Steve Jobs, and he's sitting there in his little sinister kind of pose, with his fingers it's a famous picture of him, right? And if you look on the back wall of his office, there's actually an icon on his wall, right? You can Google it right now and you can find this picture, right? And there's an icon on his wall, a Christian icon, and it is, guess what the icon's of? It is of the expulsion from the garden, right? So why would a Jewish man who became a Buddhist his entire life, right, have this Christian? I mean, come on, guys. I don't have to be Alex Jones here to point out this reality, right? So
you're saying don't do LSD. LSD is a gateway to the Antichrist. Okay, got it.
Right, but where? And then this is the guy. This is the guy that invents the one of the greatest tools of the machine, which is the cell phone, right? Which has basically, given more power to the machine. It's the cell phone is probably one of the first world technologies that has fully. You can say that in a way, the cell phone is the first cyber implant, right? The first cyberpunk implant. It's something that we carry on us, and we use it to think constantly. We use it to tell us where to go, what to do. We buy things on it. It controls our money, everything, right? It is the first actual cyber implant. It goes beyond a tool in a way. It is become it has subsumed our life. Right, the smartphone, and it's ironic that the smartphone, the first smartphone, that became worldwide, and the image of the smartphone is one that has a biblical reference on it, right? A negative biblical reference to be more precise, right?
The most negative biblical reference,
right.
The whole reason there's a Bible,
right? So Kingsnorth goes on, and he goes, when a plant is uprooted, it withers and dies. When the same happens to a person or people or a planet full of both, the result is the same. Our crisis comes, I think, from being unable to admit what on some level we know to be true, that we in the West are living inside an obsolete story. Our culture is not in danger of dying. It's already dead, and we are in denial. This now is the reality we have to wrestle with and transcend. And there's hope in there, okay? And he goes on to say, I don't think that it's exaggeration to say that the times we are currently living in would be regarded by many of our ancestors as apocalyptic. The degree of control and monitoring which we endure in developed societies, which has been accelerating for decades and which has reached warp speed in the 2020s, is creating a kind of digital holding camp in which we all find ourselves trapped, right? And he quotes Wendell Berry, who's a poet and writer, that the great division of the world will be between people who wish to live as creatures and people who wish to live as machines. Right? And so what are we talking about when we talk about the machines? In order to kind of address this point, is we have to realize that, okay, we have to kind of look at it, we live in a culture that is devoid of truth. We have removed truth, right? And the values of the machine, which has replaced the truth, which is Christ, are an attack on the values upon which pre-modern traditional societies were built. The new values are predicated on the pursuit of liberation, a one-word descriptor of the essence of the Western program since 1789. Well, there you go, liberation, right? Our aim, stated or unstated, is to liberate ourselves from nature in all regards, so that we may conquer the stars, conquer death, and become as gods, knowing good and evil. Holy crap, we're going back to that apple, right? So
Yeah.
what are the values, according to Kingsnorth, of a non-machine culture, of a non-machine tradition, right? And he calls it the 4 Ps, right?
Yeah. This was really good. This was
This is
really
really
good.
good. And he
Yeah.
contrasts it with the 4 S's of the machine.
Yes.
So
Yep.
our old values, our old cultural values that we hold on to as traditionalists are the 4 Ps. Past, where culture comes from, its history and ancestry. People, who a culture is, a sense of being, a people, a place. A place where a culture is, nature in its local and particular manifestation, and prayer, where a culture is going, its religious tradition, which relates it to God or the gods. So all cultures, as our Christian Western culture used to have, is the 4 Ps: past, people, place, and prayer, right? And when we removed Christ from the throne of our culture, right, the anti-culture of the machine, which is what we live in today, we live in an anti-culture where our elites like openly despise all those old P's, right? The anti-culture of the machine has its own values, and they supersede the values of the pre-technological age, and they spring from the need and the drive of the machine itself. They can be called the 4 S's: science, which is where we come from. Science can offer us a non-mythic version of the story and assert a claim to the true, measurable nature of reality. The self, who we are. The highest good is to serve the self and ensure its longevity. Sex, what we do. Both the highest means of sacral pleasure and through public expression of sexuality, an affirmation of individual identity. All right. And the screen is where we are going. The screen is both our main source of distraction from reality and the interface by which we are directed into coming post-human reality of the machine. All right. So you can contrast the 4 Ps and the 4 S's, right? And in the chat, right, there was a question of like, so when did era begin? When did it start? I think a good argument, like I said, I think a good argument for when did the machine really start was in the garden. I don't think that's I don't think you
Yeah.
can debate that, right? But
No, I think that is most correct.
if you really want to look at where the machine began, right, where it fully developed itself was in the Reformation, right? It actually started in late Renaissance, Reformation era Western Europe with a lot of Roman Catholic thinkers who started quantifying what God is. If you look at, and this is where we're going to get into a little bit of a debate with some religious people, is if you look at the Eastern way of looking at God is unknowable. All right. God is unknowable, right? God is a mystery, right? And in a way, ancient medieval scholars and theologians and even earlier the Desert Fathers and stuff um, looked at God as something that is non-quantifiable at all. It's God, the light unapproachable. Right. Well, late medieval, late medieval, Renaissance, around the time of Reformation, those thinkers started to quantify God, to make God as part of this universe, right? And during the Reformation, those guys, they basically made it about personal interpretation, right? It is my own interpretation of the Bible and of God that matters. It is about me. It is about the I, right? Martin Luther's like famous like line, right? Is "Here I stand," right? It's I, right? Me. I am interpreting this, right? And this is the truth. And out of this like this scientific quantification, you took a God that was a mystery, right? An unknowable quality, and ultimately an organic living entity, right? And what I mean by that is that the universe in pagan times and in Christian times was considered an organic entity. The earth was alive, right? There was that they would look at the stars as having souls, and the celestial bodies as souls, right? And they would look at the universe as a living, breathing kind of entity, right? Not physically, right? But like metaphysically. But after the Reformation and in the age of early science, they started looking at the world in a mechanistic view, right? That God was a machine, right? That the universe was a clock and God was a watchmaker, right? This is the very like enlightenment kind of view of the metaphysical, right? That we could describe everything in the universe, including God himself, and that we could find God through science, that we could find truth. But what happened is that through the telescopes, through the science, through all that, they didn't find God. So then what they did is they removed God altogether, right? And that's where the universe became a machine, that humans no longer became part of this organic living universe, but a completely separate, transcendent species that, in a way, was better than the universe, right? And that's what we have today, right? What is the goal, all right, of the trans movement? Right? There's a great chapter about the trans movement, which as I was reading it, I was like, "Yep, okay, that's exactly what I've been thinking." Right?
Yeah.
We think of the
Alex,
trans. Hmm?
sorry, something I want to bring into the discussion here just to help people relate to it. In Fellowship of the Ring, there is a line, or there is that encounter between Gandalf and Saruman, when Saruman meets with Gandalf that first time and his betrayal is revealed. Can I read that real quick? Because
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
directly relates to what we're talking about here. For I am Saruman the Wise, Saruman Ringmaker, Saruman of many colors. I looked then and saw that his robes, which seemed white, were not so, but were woven of all colors. And if he moved, they shimmered and changed hue so that the eye was bewildered. I liked white better, I said. White, he sneered. It serves as a beginning. White cloth may be dyed, the white page can be overwritten, and the white light can be broken. In which case it is no longer white, said I. And he that breaks a thing to find out what it has left, sorry, and he that breaks a thing to find out what it has left the path of wisdom. So when you're describing, that transition, Saruman is a wizard who breaks white to find out what it's made out of. The Reformation.
Right.
Break white to find out what it's made out of. And Gandalf, he's still a proper Catholic, still has that proper mysticism, remains the wizard. And later on goes from, Gandalf the Great and Gandalf the White through death and, and the whole thing. So like Tolkien saw it too, but it's exactly that. It's that breaking white to find out what it's made out of. It's the prism. It's that prism of good old William Herschel. I'm going to break light to see what it's made out of.
Right.
Whoops. Because,
Yeah.
like Kingsnorth says, I'm sure you're leading towards this. The problem with scientific advancement and the problem with scientific knowledge is that finding out how things work wasn't just to find out how things work, but so that it can there be controlled, which is
Right.
the garden all over again.
Right. Which, when you look at magic itself, right? You look at magic in the occult. Well, let's look at magic in Lord of the Rings, right? Lord of the Rings is very interesting because it approaches magic in a very Christian way. There's two kinds of magic in Lord of the Rings, right?
Yeah.
There's the magic of the elves, which is a pagan Christian magic, and there's the magic of Isengard, which is technology. And if you look at the way Saruman and Sauron use magic, is they destroy nature, right? They destroy and they pervert. The orcs are, magically altered, tortured elves, right? Saruman destroys the forests around Isengard, right? And he uses magic in a way we use science and we extract power from the earth, right? Through force and through, in a way, a perverted destruction, right? But then the elves illustrated very well in the scene where the elf is taking Frodo on horseback across the river when Frodo's injured after the Borrowites stab him with the sword, right?
Yeah.
The elf doesn't make the river come. The elf asks the river to come, right? And it is a synergy of nature with nature, right? Um, you see it in the movies really done really well, where Gandalf uses his magic. He asks the butterfly for help, right? When he sends it, he doesn't twist it to its will. He's asking. Um, Aragon, when he uses his healing magic, which he has, he is asking, right, the gods for help. And if you look at early science, whether it's like Newton or any of those early scientists, right, they were all occultists. They were all alchemists, right? Newton wrote mostly on alchemy. He's known for
Yeah.
his mathematical kind of ideas, but the majority of his written work is on alchemy. And what is alchemy? What is this magic that these late Renaissance, early modern era guys? It was all about control, right? All about
Controlling the elements.
a science. Science is wrapped in the language of religion, right? There is no such thing as a true materialist in our world, because the machine itself is a religious entity, right? The scientists are just priests, and they talk about their laboratories and their academic, towers in the same way priests talk about their churches and their chapels, right? Because science is just the magic of materialism in a way, right? So it's really interesting that it is about control, but it is about becoming like gods, right? That is ultimately the goal of the machine. But even more so, right? At least to us, that's the selling point. The selling point is that we are going to become like gods. But in reality, it's a con job, right? Because we're not going to become like gods. All we are is becoming better fodder for the machine. And what's interesting about this book is that is a very, and this is where I have a feeling it's gonna clash against some like normie conservative kind of ideology, is that it's a very anti-capitalist book, and it puts the ills of a lot of the world problems on, at the feet of capitalism. And it even speaks well about some Marxism, even though it's very critical of, the end stages of Marxism and where Marxism leads, but it does praise its prescriptive power, because I fully agree with that. Marx and Engels had a very good grasp of what was going on. Of course, they were just using the prescription for their own, delusions that led to, even more so, right?
Right.
But it talks about how all this freedom, all this self-actualization that we are sold is actually just more slavery, right? How all revolutions were not created by the peasants, by the people. They're all by elites, whether it was the French Revolution or the Communist Revolution,
or the American
Revolution, to be, more lightly so. But ultimately is the destruction of the local, in order for the machine to work, the local, the normal, the family has to be destroyed, because there is no profit in any of that, right? The true profit.
One of the things I like, one of the words that Kingsnorth I'll say reclaims, for lack of a better word, but he says the indigenous cultures need to be destroyed. And he's not talking about, the poor Aztecs or whatever the hell. No. It's what is the normal pattern of life in a geographical area with a particular people. That's indigenous. So, in England, the small town, the small hamlet, the small village, that is indigenous English culture. In America, the kinds of towns that like my ancestors set up, that is normal American indigenous culture, for example. So just because it's not brown doesn't mean it can't be indigenous.
Right. And ultimately, the left, when they say that, and this is where we on the right have to be honest with ourselves, right? Ever since the modern era, when we rejected the traditionalist Christian worldview of the Middle Ages, where monarchy was tempered by the church and everything was aimed towards a higher good, which was God. We've replaced both those with a bourgeoisie drive towards profit. And our entire colonial movement has been about profit. All right. The West is guilty of conquering and destroying the world. All right. This is nobody that has spent any time traveling the world can say, oh, yeah, that's not true. No, it's absolutely true. You can go to the jungles of Papua New Guinea like I have, and I have seen the fact that Papua New Guinea, they drink Coke and Starbucks, and yeah, they might be, eating each other in the jungle in some deep, dark places that are still left. But for the most part, it's, they have Instagram. All right. I have people from Papua New Guinea on my Instagram right now that I'm friends with from when I was there. Right. And
Yeah.
that's the machine, right? We have
Yeah.
conquered everything in the name of development. But the reality is we've conquered everything in the name of market, right?
Yeah.
Of opening markets. And we have
Yeah.
created the left they're liars in a way, because they talk about diversity, but they don't really believe in diversity, or at least the machine doesn't believe in diversity, right? Because what the left is really putting forth is a monoculture. The right pushes the machine monoculture through its embrace of market forces and conquest and appreciation of earlier 19th century and 18th century colonialism, right? The left
Right.
pretends that, oh no, we support diversity, but they're really pushing another cultural monoculture in the form of, the globo homo. And that's really the end result, right? And he doesn't use this term globo homo, but in a way, I think it's a fantastic term, because it really stands not for global, it's a double kind of
Global
untouched
homogenization.
global
Global homo-
homogenization, right?
Yeah. Right.
It's got the joke of being global homosexuality, which in itself is, ultimately goes back to the four S's, right?
Well,
Sexuality.
Alex, you could point out that homosexuality is a form of uh, homogeneous act, because you put
Oh,
two men together,
absolutely.
you put two women together. What does it produce? Nothing.
Right.
It doesn't make anything.
Right.
So there you go.
It's the end, right? It's
Yeah,
a
diversity starts
homosexual.
with a man and a woman.
A homosexual is the ultimate consumer. A homosexual is the
Yeah,
ultimate agent of the machine, because you know what?
yeah,
What is the Borg but an asexual homosexual, right? They're genderless, sexless creatures, right? That are ultimate consumers in a way, right? They're, you don't have, if you're not striving towards any truth, and you're not working towards, uh, a family growth or anything like that, you have all the money in the world to spend on all sorts of, frivolous
stuff.
consumerism
Yeah,
and
yeah,
self-aggrandizement, right? Ultimately, that's the end stage, right? A mass, homosexualism, like gay and lesbian, for example, is just a stepping stone towards the real goal, which is a genderless kind of asexual identity, because that's
right.
really what the ideal Borg-like state of the machine is, right? And we see this in the transgender movement, right? Because the transgender movement itself is just a step, right? It's not the end stage. Transgenderism is not the end stage, guys, right? It's only a step. The real end goal is transhumanism, right? It
Right.
is to transcend sexual gender normality, right? To where humans are
Yeah,
no longer human at all, right? And the goal of transgenderism and of very progressive feminism, for example, is to remove motherhood and to remove the messiness of childbirth, of childbearing from the human existence, right? The goal of these people, and this is not me being insane, if you spend any time reading anything out of Silicon Valley, right? This is what these guys want. They want to create humans outside of humanity, right? They want immortality, and they want humanity to propagate without sex, basically, without a mother and a father, to completely break the cycle of nature and create humans in in test tubes, basically, in artificial wombs, right? To
yeah.
liberate humans from the messiness of biological existence completely.
Well, the thing is this. The thing is this. There is a fundamental flaw in humanity. Correct? I mean, no one can deny that our history is replete with death, murder, slaughter, horrible, horrible, horrible things going back forever. Our deepest stories speak of cataclysmic, unimaginable disasters, right? Think about the flood narrative. humans were so evil, God wiped out the world and saved a very select few to continue on. You know what I mean? Like, it's in there. Christianity says the way out is through the cross. There's no other way out. You have to go through the cross. It requires death. You must die. And, God, Lord have mercy, right? On the flip side, the transhumanist machine, this machine that we're describing, this machine that Kingsnorth is describing, it claims to have the knowledge so you don't have to die. It's the garden all over again. But what it actually does, its actual prescription, is somehow removing sin by removing everything you are as a human, down to your very biology, becoming a question of technique, a question of which version of you shall we create today. And it doesn't work. None of it works. This is they might as well try to repeal the law of gravity. That would at least would be honest, and people could see how insane it is. It will get to the point where buy this product and you can fly and you can jump off a building and defy the law of gravity. I mean, that's essentially what they're saying. And it's going to work as well as they think it is, which is not at all. And if folks doubt just how malicious society is, how malicious this machine is, I keep thinking of the fact that they have a gun pointed at the head of the entire species, which is nuclear weapons, obviously. It's like it's all there. It's just, holy shit. If things got bad enough, they'll blow it all up and start over. They could, this could occur.
Right.
Anyway.
So the question now is, by understanding, I think the key to understanding the machine is that we have to realize that our conversations are, we cannot fall prey to these silly, sectarian or surface level arguments about the West or what we do and that kind of stuff, because ultimately there are arguments about truth. And ultimately the problem is not like, blue-haired retards or any of that stuff. Those are just symptoms of the real problem. The real problem is the lack of truth in our culture, right? So then the question is, how do we heal? How does this heal itself, right? And he quotes Robert Bly, who wrote some like masculine type, male philosophy in the 80s and 90s. And he's a mythologist and a poet. And his answer was through story and ritual. Right? He says, the work of the age of inversion in the anti-culture, which is the culture of the machine, is not to fight puny online battles or to look for victory in some imagined political settlement or brilliant new ideology. Our wounds are much deeper than that. Our stories are cracked at their foundations, and as a consequence, we are afloat in a fantastical world of our own making, grasping a freedom entirely enslaved. The only question worth asking in times like these is, how should we live? And he goes, the right kind of warrior takes on his own internal demons before he sails out to take those of others. He takes his stand and stands his ground. And without giving in to the Nile of the age, he cleaves to what he believes in without failing into the traps laid by partisanship, anger, and self-righteousness. Most of all, he works to clear out his own inner junkyard so that he can go searching for truth and recognize it when he finds it. His war is against the worst of himself and for the best of the world, and what he is fighting for is the love he often fails at. His most effective weapon is sacrifice. All right. So there we go, guys. Like, we have to realize that we are living in an age of death, right? We are living in an age of ruin. And the only thing we can do, we cannot put our trust in political movements, or we cannot put our trust in any of that stuff, right? In a way, we have one of three choices, right? And our first choice is to look at the world, to look at the culture war, to look at what's going on, and go in there guns blazing, right? To pick a side, in the culture war and fight, whether we become a hardcore environmentalist or any type of ideologue, nationalist, Christian nationalist, pagans, whatever, right? Or the other like kind of drive that we have, right? Is we have a drive to go just hide from it, right? To go into a cave, to turn away from the world and build a monastery somewhere and just, hope to God that the tides of the machine don't destroy our walls, right? And kind of retreat into, the forest somewhere. Or the third option, which is in a way Umaswil's option, right, is to be a barbarian inside the machine, right? Is to recognize the machine, to see it around us, to understand what it wants from us, and to resist it from the inside. And I think that is, that is our option, right? And
Yeah.
how
Well,
do we?
I want to push back on that Umaswil bit just a little bit. I ultimately agree, but I want to point towards to where I think Kingsnorth is saying that we need to go, which I think you'll agree when I say this. The problem in Umaswil is that the Anarch ultimately just does what he feels he wants to do at any particular moment. And the problem is he has no higher reactionary purpose. He goes into the heart of Africa, he goes into the heart of darkness and is never seen again. You know what I mean? Which is fine. I mean, it's what he does. It's he's living in according to his principles. Okay, sure, fine. But what you said is right. He is a barbarian. He is a barbarian inside the culture, right? He's got nothing higher than just being a barbarian. The thing with Against the Machine is the term Kingsnorth comes up with, reactionary radical, to
Right.
tie it back to what you said at the beginning, where someone said, "Oh, they called you an extremist." Next time, look them right in the eye and be like, "That doesn't even get close to what I really am." Because being a reactionary radical, we're looking at the higher things. We're looking to God. We're looking to our salvation through the cross, through death, right? And we wish to live as creatures, not as machines. Simply living as a creature is going to be a metaphysical nuclear strike on what the machine is attempting to do. If you live as a creature, not a machine, everyone's going to see it and everyone's going to notice and everyone's going to look at you and go, "What the fuck are you up to?"
Right.
And you're just going to be, "I'm acting like a normal human. That's what I am." And
Right.
that by itself is going to be enough to simply upend the machine. And it's reactionary because it's looking to the ultimate and highest good, and it's radical because not because being a normal human being as God intended is radical, quote unquote. It's radical vis-a-vis the culture, because the culture is, no, you need to be a machine. You need to press the buttons. You need to earn the money. You need to make number go up. And you just look at the number and go, "Fuck the number. He's nuts." The number, then it just loses its goddamn mind.
Right.
It loses its
Right.
freaking mind.
It's
So
basically
there you go,
reject
guys.
the
It's
machine
actually,
every day.
yeah, it's actually very easy to do this. It's actually very easy to fight back. Just be a creature, and
Right.
your existence will be so offensive. You'll simply do good. You'll simply do
Right.
good by being a normal person. So
Well,
that's really the fourth way, and I think you alluded to that earlier. That, hey, there's a fourth. That's the fourth way through this.
what I want to do now, and I'm going to kind of break the rules a bit. I'm actually going to read you guys the last chapter of the book. All right. And I think that it's critical, right? And I honestly think that all you guys listening now and in the future should absolutely buy this book. And I hope that if Paul ever comes across this podcast episode, he doesn't get upset that I read the last chapter of his book. But I'm going to, because I think it's important.
Guys,
Okay.
buy enough of the book that it won't matter. Just buy enough of the book that he'll be fine with it. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. The last chapter is titled Rain Dance. All right. And it starts. Not so long ago, I found myself standing on the west coast of Kerry in view of the Blasket Islands with one of the Ireland's best known traditional musicians, a man from a long established musical dynasty. We only just met. He was the sort of man that the Irish West used to produce by the dozen, but who is rare enough now. He knew who he was and where he was, and he wouldn't shy from saying it. "Where are you from?" he asked me. "England," I said. "I know that," he said, "but where?" "Well, my family are from London," I said, "so I suppose I'm a Londoner." "You can do better than that," he said, and then looked directly at me until I did. Well, I responded hesitantly, I don't really come from anywhere. The Southeast, I suppose. My family moved around, but my name is Kentish. Kingsnorth is a village in Kent. I can trace my ancestors back there 1,000 years. I've visited the churchyard they're buried in. Well, then, he said, that's where you're from. Those are your people. Yes, I said, I suppose that's right. You know, he said to me, squinting into the wind, the English tried to eliminate the Irish from the earth, from Queen Elizabeth onward. That was policy. They wanted us gone. We were savages. But I've said for a long time, we can't blame the English people for that. We can blame the crown, but not the people. When I look at England today, I see a people who have no clue who they are. No, we don't have a clue, I said. And that's policy too. They can't uproot the world until they've uprooted us. In England, when you meet someone new, you ask them what they do, which is the same as in the US, my note. In Ireland, you ask them where they're from, and it's highly localized question. Where are you from? In the countryside means which village, which townland or house, rather than which nation or even county. This way of locating people in space is very ancient. Who are your people? It asks, and what is your place? It's a way of seeing that is dying now and would not be found amongst the new urban generations, from who all places are much the same, all mediated from within the digital non-place we drift through. But this old question, where are you from, is the universal aboriginal inquiry. It cuts to the heart of the matter. Back at the beginning of this book, I wrote about Simone Weil's 1943 book, The Need for Roots, which explores the peculiar rootlessness of 20th century humanity and what the circumstance has denied us. Weil makes her stand on the particular ground. It's worth reminding ourselves now as we come to the end of her claim. To be rooted is perhaps the most important and least recognized need of the human soul. It is one of the hardest to define. A human being has roots by virtue of his real, active, and natural participation in the life of a community, which preserves the living shape certain particular treasures of the past and certain particular expectations of the future. Every human being needs to have multiple roots. It is necessary for him to draw well nigh the whole of his moral, intellectual, and spiritual life by way of environment of which he forms a natural part. We all need multiple roots. The rise of this thing I call the machine, an external manifestation of an inner hunger, has steadily dug up so many of those roots. We would all like to blame someone else for this, but Weil will not allow it. It is Western people, she insists, who have everywhere destroyed the past, stupidly, blindly, both at home and abroad. This has been the work of the modern West and of modernity as a whole, uprooting, making it new. After the fall of Christendom, the West dedicated itself to upturning of all tradition, and this, in turn, became the new Western tradition. As we have uprooted the traditions of much of the world, we have also uprooted our own. We have made ourselves homeless. Now, because we no longer have a culture, we have a culture war instead. But I don't believe in this conflict. I won't send my children to fight it. If any real war is in evidence today, it is a spiritual war. It is the machine versus human scale culture, the technicum versus creation, our desire to be gods versus our desire to be with God. All of us are daily uprooted by this thing that we ourselves are making. Black and white, immigrant and native, west and east, man and woman, we all have our different stories, but the great unsettling is our common inheritance. Ian McGilchrist's belief, as we saw in the last chapter, is that our entire civilization is out of touch with reality. But what is reality, and how might it be touched again? On that question, Weil and I come to the same conclusion as McGilchrist, that far more of us than ever before in history of the world live divorced from nature, alienated from the structures and traditions of stable society, and indifferent to the divine. That these three elements have always been what have provided us with an overarching sense of belonging. In other words, people, place, prayer, and the past. These are our roots, but where can we touch them again? Perhaps we could find them in the past, but since we have no time machine, we can't go there even if we wanted to. And even if we could, we find ourselves strangers there too. We will find them in the future then, not if the machine continues on its current path. There will be no place for human scale living come to singularity, no place for humans as we know them. The past, the future, they are not ours to inhabit. Home is not there. So where is it? Well, perhaps it is here. Perhaps it was here all along. After all, we are still people. We still inhabit places. We have our inheritance, and God is still all around us and within us if we want to go looking for him. We have all the ingredients. Maybe we just need to work out how to mix them. My educated European head is in trouble, wrote the Irish philosopher mystic John Moriarty in 1994. Irie, I can never pronounce that, guys. Irie, as in
Erie.
Ireland. Erie is in
Erie.
trouble. Erie is in trouble. Europa is in trouble. Ecclesia is in trouble. Moriarty's trouble, which came to him in cantos in the bogs of the West, was the same story expressed in McGilchrist's measurements arguments, in Wheel's mystic politics, in Wordsworth's terrors of the night lake. The academic turned gardener had cooperated successfully with modern European education, had been marinated in modern common sense, in a modern consensus or conspiracy about reality, and had left him bereft. Living as we all do through a destitute time, he too was looking for home. On his wanderings and in his readings, Moriarty came to believe that what the Irish and the Europeans and all of the modern people needed was to access their own version of what the Australian Aboriginals called Alteringa, dream time. Taking this for the title of his best-known book, Moriarty produced a text that is itself a strange kind of dream. In his words, an ailing, an old Gaelic term meaning dream vision, hardly a manifesto writer. Moriarty nevertheless had a purpose in this dreaming. The hope is that, however ethnically various it might be, there is a European dream time. It is sometimes the case, isn't it, that individuals are healed as they are present only as consequence of being healed as they were in their past. As with individuals, so sometimes with the whole people. Our past we will always have with us. Our past we must always re-realize. And to do this, we need people who can live in our cultural dream time. People who go walking about creatively within the old myths. People who go walkabout in the unknown. What Moriarty is seeking through Dreamtime, and in all his other work too, is access to his own aboriginality, a way of learning how to be indigenous again in the age of the machine. Words like indigenous tend to make people twitchy in the West today, unless we're talking about tribal people in some safely far off place, and it's not too hard to see why. Downstream of the Holocaust, we are still highly sensitive to notions of rootedness, land, and belonging. Some people hear hearth and home as blood and soil. Others just pretend to for their own political gain. We should certainly keep our ears pricked up in this regard and to avoid making idols of nations or cultures. But we should remember, too, that our 21st century reluctance to talk about who and where we are has provided useful ammunitions for proponents of machine modernity to demolish every limit, tradition, and boundary in sight, while painting those who object as fossils or fascists. Moriarty, for his part, explicitly repudiated any racial or sectarian ground for his notion of a postmodern dreamtime. The world he is talking about is the world beyond the veil, and is accessible to anyone whose sensibility is sufficiently attuned. He seeks an Irish dreamtime, a European dreamtime, a universal dreamtime with local colors, the shadow of a particular mountain, the taste of a particular wind. He is looking to an earth-wide story which is told everywhere in a local dialect. This kind of aboriginality, this deep belonging to place and the culture that springs from it is, he says, our human inheritance. The stories we tell in a place make up the culture we are part of. This is what we have done forever. We must never stop doing it. It's easy to see why this sort of talk is controversial to some and incomprehensible to others. The liberal view of nature, which includes human nature, sees people as deracinated individuals able to move around the world like pieces on a chessboard. Every square is identical, and the pieces never change in relation to where they are. We can shuffle about following money or work or ambition or pleasure, and we will remain the same people as we do so. But people aren't like this. Places change us, and we change them. Everything is in relationship. Our left hemisphere world has long forgotten this. What might this indigeneity mean in a world made by the machine? Maybe a chance for a resettlement, a restoration. If we are part of a culture with a long tradition, we should respect it, protect it, nurture it, and build on its strengths. And those of us who are disconnected from their ancestral place, or even from the idea of one, Simone Weil's proposal for people like us was the regrowing of roots, which is, after all, as much a part of human journey as staying put. The plant that grows in new soil may not look like the plants that grew before. To be indigenous may not be the same thing as being native. But the earth-wide aboriginality of which Moriarty speaks, this ability to root in place, to nurture it, and in turn to be made by it, this is accessible to anyone, and it is the antithesis of the pseudo-reality which the machine world offers. Perhaps like the musician of Kerry, we live in a place of our ancestors. Perhaps like me and my family, we are relative newcomers to the land we find ourselves in. Either way, the correct quality of attention paid to the place we inhabit, to the people we inhabit it with, and to the culture it generates. In these times, this represents the radical move, to turn our gaze upwards, to direct it toward true worship in a nihilistic age, in a world of self-love. This, in turn, is an act of rebellion. Once the poet Gary Snyder, the Thoreau of the Beats, produced a product of the 60s upheaval, was asked how people should respond to the combined environmental and cultural crises of the late 20th century. What was the best path? Reform, revolution, technology, politics? Snyder had a better idea. The most radical thing you can do, he replied, is to stay at home. Once there was a counterculture. Back in the 60s, as the last of the old world crumbled, the marginal energies that had been building for nearly a century exploded into a revolution that still shapes us. The man, the system, became the enemy. Strictures, limits, boundaries, norms, old ways, all would go. Free love, wild music, the end of the family, the end of all old repressions and secret and lies, the eclipse of religion by spirituality, the new age, Aquarius rising. We had been hemmed in for too long. People of my generation, the children of the boomers, grew up in the wake of this. We never got to experience Haight-Ashbury or swinging London, but we got to see the backwash, the broken homes, the new drug culture, the abortions, the pop charts, the mockery of all authority, the easy sex and booze, the loosening of the rules, the strange sense of anything that was permitted, and yet nothing was centered or lasting. The counterculture had in its own way taken aim at the machine, at mammon, at the military-industrial complex, but it had stood on the ground of extreme personal liberation, and the ground turned out to be a swampy to hold. It took 2 decades for the hippies to become yuppies, 3 for the simple lifers to become Silicon Valley billionaires, 4 for imagine there's no countries to become the policy of the WF and the WTO. Now everything is hanging out everywhere. The counterculture has become the culture, and everyone is having a bad trip. What would a new counterculture look like? I suppose it would have to avoid making the same mistakes, so it would not reject the past. It would not try to be blank slate its way towards some national utopia. It would remember that every time this had been tried, it had simply been broken more out of bounds, uprooted us further, and greased the path of the machine. Instead, a new counterculture would have to be rooted in the eternal things. It would need its feet on the ground and its face pointed towards the dream time. It would express what Moriarty called our aboriginal desire to be in league with the earth. It would need to embrace not a rebellious individualism, but a reactionary radicalism, a rejection of machine values based on an embrace instead of the eternal things. Its heart would be the values of people, place, prayer, and the past. And what if we don't try to go back to anything? And what if we also slough off the idea of saving the world? What if we reject all the utopias and frown at all the gadgets and the grand plans? What if we take off our shoes and get our feet back properly on the ground? At this time of year, the soil is warm out here. There are a lot of nettles around. It's true, but the sting is never as painful as you think it's going to be. Yes, I know what you're asking, but how? I can't answer the question. I don't know you, but I have worked through this for long enough to understand that if we start from where we are, things will ripple out. If we don't have an end game, saving the world, say that everything gets easier, the earth still turns. There are churches, prayer works, nature gives and takes. The sunset is astonishing. There is poverty and death and injustice. There are miracles and there is some strange saving love. It's all still there. Maybe the question is what we turn our attention to and how. The new edition of Moriarty's Dreamtime is published by the small Irish publisher Lilliput Press. On the back cover are a few reviews from approving critics, including one Aidan Carl Matthews, who offers up the best image I've come across for Moriarty's quintoxic project. To write in this way about the myth world of ancient Erie, in the midst of the greed and rapacity of the Celtic tiger economy, says Matthews, is like performing a rain dance on the astroturf of the modern world. Why not? Why not rain dance on the astroturf? Maybe sometimes rain dances work. And even if they don't, well, what would you rather be doing? Jogging down the hard shoulder in Lycra with your headphones on and your Fitbit measuring your heartbeat? Rain dance. We should all rain dance. Call down the powers, offer ourselves up to God, enter the dream time, head for home. Before he died in 2007, Moriarty was working on a plan for a rebirth of the Irish hedge school. Hedge schools were a feature of 18th century Ireland, where British penal laws banned education for non-Anglicans in an attempt to extinguish Irish Catholicism. In response, people set up illegal schools, sometimes literally in hedges or caves or barns, as both an act of defiance and a practical necessity. They said, "We will not be denied what we need to know. We will go outside and we will learn it anyways." Moriarty's hedge school was to teach its own idiosyncratic version of mystical Christianity, to teach others how to rain dance by the motorway junctions and Aldi superstores and data centers of the brave New Ireland. Once in a dark age, very long time ago, the Irish built monasteries. As the pagan armies flooded through the West, burning books and people, slaughtering priests and kidnapping villagers, the monks kept the manuscripts safe in the teachings. Then later, they emptied themselves and went out to the margins to offer up those teachings to the barbarian kings. It was a ridiculous idea, as ridiculous as sending 2 halflings to throw a ring into a volcano under the nose of the Dark Lord. It was madness, but it worked. Sometimes the ridiculous ideas are the only ones worth having. I've come to the end now, and here is what I think, that the age of the machine is not, after all, a hopeless time. Actually, it is a time we were born for. We can't leave it, so we have to fully inhabit it. We have to understand it, to challenge it, resist it, subvert it, walk through it on towards something better. If we can see what it is, we have a duty to speak to the words to those who don't yet see, all the while struggling to remain human. People place prayer at the past. Human community, roots in nature, connection to God, memories passed down and on. These are eternal things. We could form hedge schools to teach them. We could live them in a way we can. We can build communities. We could write books. We could plant trees. We could do anything. Really, none of it will solve all the world's problems or all of ours. We're still going to die, and so one day is the machine. But what will we do in the meantime? What will we do amidst the rise of robots, amidst the ascendancy of all these tiny, laughable, tyrannical dreams? Rain dance on the astroturf. Rain dance to call them the spirit upon them and us. Rain dance to defy the machine. Rain dance to remember your ancestors. Rain dance to offer up prayers to your home. Rain dance to forest and the prairie and the meadow. Rain dance to reclaim your stories. Rain dance to discover where you come from. Rain dance on top of your smartphone until it's nothing but splinters. Rain dance against the myths of the age. Rain dance against the false gods. Rain dance with a smile on your face. What have you got to lose? Enter the dream time. Begin the restoration. Become human again. Remain human despite it all. I think that might be what home looks like in the end. Anyways, I thought that was amazing. Okay. And I apologize to Paul for reading the last chapter of his book. But I think that is a message that we all need to take, because while we are in the midst of this machine, of this antichrist, of this technological death that we are surrounded by, I think that we can just break through, and it's the little things, it's the internal things, it's taking care of our home, it's praying before dinner with our families, it's praying before bed with your children, it's teaching your children to love God and to love your neighbor, and it's going to church on Sundays and being part of the community, being a participant in the community. All right. One day at church, knowing your neighbors, knowing the people next to you during liturgy is more valuable than all the 10,000 friends you are connected with on Instagram and on Substack. Okay. One hello to somebody walking into your church for the first time has more value than all the likes and all the subscriptions you can get on any of your podcasts. All right. One hug from your child has more value than anything in the world. All right. And that's how we win. All right. We realize that, yes, in our culture, the throne is empty and we have displaced God from his rightful place, but we cannot let the machine displace God from our heart. All right. And that's all I have to say about that, guys. What do you guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. What do you think, Phisto? I think we lost Phisto again. But yeah. Right. Phisto's on his way back. So, I mean, I think we're going to be done for the day. Yeah. We lost it. And I think that this book is amazing. I think that Paul.
All right, I'm back.
Yeah. Welcome back.
Good Lord, this damn thing.
It
I clicked the mute button. It's funny. All of a sudden, I'm having all kinds of problems when we're discussing against the machine. Curious. No, I had one sentence dominate my mind as you were reading that chapter, and I'd like to share it. And this is particularly for Americans, because us Americans are going to have the hardest time reckoning with the fact that our nation has been the primary vector of the machine for at least since 1945. And that is simply something we're going to have to reckon with and repent from. However, this sentence gives me great hope. And I heard it from a Russian once, of all people. But he said, America was the first nation to enter the Black Lodge, and I believe it would be the first to leave it.
It has to be.
Yeah, it will be. It will be. And I think
Has
and
to
I
be.
think and I think Kingsnorth is right. We are in a period of deep hope, of deep promise, of deep potential. And we simply need to follow Christ's example. It's through the cross, guys. Whether you like it or not, that's the way out. That's the way through. Not just for yourself, but for everything and everyone. So fuck it, we ball.
What we have to look at, where we are right now.
Yeah.
We are approaching, it's October. It's October 14th, and by the time people at home will be listening to this episode, it'll be probably the 16th, maybe, if I get around to editing in time.
Yeah.
And we're getting close to Christmas, right? And what is Christmas?
Yep.
But the celebration of the birth of Christ, right? And the world is renewed through that birth, right? And we have to realize that even in the darkest times, God comes through and send
Yep.
us his son, and he fixed it. He fixed everything, right? We are, my priest, um, Father James, and he's, my spiritual guidance, one of the wisest men I know. He'll never admit it. He'll be like, no, 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 anything. I'm retarded. He's truly one of the wisest men I know. He said that he's like, the best part about everything, he said, is that, we already won, right? All this is defeated. All the evil in the world has already been defeated. We're just playing the mop-up operation. Unfortunately, we are the people that have to do the mop-ups. And so therefore we have to live through this, unfortunately, right? But there's joy, right? And we can fix everything by just focusing on ourselves, right? And there's little practical things we can do. We can always look at the practical things, because sometimes when we talk like this and we read chapters like this, we can become a little bit too esoteric, too philosophical, right? But there's little things, all right? We can do little things like, what? Let's put the damn cell phone down, all right? Maybe instead of spending half an hour or 45 minutes or, hours sometimes, right? Like you said, your students often spend doom scrolling on the internet. We
Yeah.
put the freaking cell phone down and we spend time with our wives, with our children. We put down the cell phone, we put down the video game controller. Or if we're alone, maybe we take off our shoes and go into our backyard and mow the lawn, right? Or go on a hike and look at the world, right? And we do the little things. But ultimately, like you said in that chapter, what a ridiculous idea that two hobbits were to take the ring, right? You know what I mean? Like, how silly is that, right? When you think about it,
Yeah.
like the whole plot of that epic is just two dumb hobbits, some silly normal, shire dwellers. The fate of the world realizing them, because that's the truth, though, right? Even though Lord of the Rings is not a true story, it's a fiction, but it's actually a true story. It's a typological story. It's true, right? Like, we can do little things, love each other, go to church on Sundays and pray and do all these things, right? And we're here for a reason. We're here on this earth because it is our time, right? And in order to do that, we need to realize who our enemies are, what the problems are, and we need to resist it. And unfortunately, it's not an idyllic world of the Lothlorien. We live in the cyberpunk world of the machine, and we will defeat it from the inside, because in the end, we win. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in. It was wonderful. I really, I cannot like recommend this book more. All right. Out of all the books I've ever read, this is on my top list. It is one that I recommend you read, because I think it's really going to shape my outlook on the future. And it's going to shape the way I approach politics and the culture war and, the creation of art.
Yeah, man.
From now on.
It's gonna be lit.
It's going to be lit, right? We're going to rain dance our way.
Get hype, folks. Yep.
Right.
Get in
And
the car, nerds. We're killing the machine.
thank you for joining me. Thank you for putting up with me reading an entire chapter. I'm not going to usually do that, but I felt like it was necessary, right?
Goes the
Maybe we'll
spirit
do
leads.
maybe we'll just do a podcast where we're just reading like the Bible or something, you know. see
Yeah,
who,
well, I mean, we joked a while back about doing like poetry and stuff, and I would definitely approve of something like that.
yeah,
I would like my chops. I would like to try my chops at reading aloud on air. I think that would be a lot of fun.
yeah. I'm not the best reader, but I try my best, you know. But
I mean, think about it though. Think about it though. You know, so many people don't read books these days. So how perfect would it be to tune into a podcast where we read books to you? Ha!
yeah,
And it's not an audiobook. No, no, no. It's none of that. It's none of that fake and gay audiobook stuff. It's I'm reading this book to you, a person,
yeah. Alex
right
and
now,
Phisto
live.
mispronounce Erie.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Erie. I mean, I grew up on Lake Erie. I don't know if that counts.
I think
but
it is Erie. Yeah.
I feel like I have some authority in the matter. So
I will take the hit as saying that English is my second language, guys. So I can I can use that excuse when I mispronounce words.
goddamn immigrants, goddamn immigrants,
I'm
you guys
sorry.
coming in here with your different languages and your funny food.
Yeah. I'm sorry, guys. I just
No,
you
it's
know, I
fine.
have
We
no
love you.
excuse.
We love you all
I
the same.
should know all these words. But anyways, guys, thank you for tuning in. It was wonderful having you guys live tonight. Like I said, once again, please go out and buy that book and read it, man. I read it in the last 2
guys.
days. It was wonderful. I
Yes.
highly recommend you read it. And he does a lot of videos. He's done a lot of videos lately. He's done a speech at Harvard that was really good. I listened to it on the way home from work today.
Ooh, link me that.
Yeah, just Google Paul Kingsnorth, and there's like the first thing that pops on YouTube is on Harvard. He also does a speech at a monastery in, I believe, Ireland. Actually, it's very interesting that he, there's a little bit of a spiritual connection here, that he decided to become Orthodox, and he decided, he found his way into a Romanian Orthodox monastery in Ireland, and he became Romanian Orthodox. So that's kind of cool.
Funny how that. Well, it's even more funny because my mother's side of the family is Irish, and the line. Well, that's where you're from, where your ancestors are buried. That led me to go down the rabbit hole and find out where my ancestors are buried. And Massachusetts Bay Colony, baby. That's where I'm from.
Right.
For better or worse, there it is. That's where they all are.
That this really touches me, because in a way, like, I'm an immigrant. This is not my homeland, right? This is not America's not my homeland, and I love America, and I love the byways and the mythology and the cultural elements of like old America so much, right? I loved when I lived in California. I loved the Wild West 49er culture you could find all over California, and even going back further into the missions when the Spanish were doing the mission system.
Yeah.
And I love the idea of the West, and it's just to me, it's just fascinating history. And I think that there's a truth to America in the West, if that makes sense. And I think Cormac McCarthy captures it really well. And the two parts of American culture that like have always appealed to me was the West and the South. And I went from living in the Wild West of California to the deep South of South Carolina. So I get to experience both of my American cultural elements. Of course, there's a Starbucks across the street, and the deep South here feels a lot like Orange County, to be honest.
We'll have to discuss Kingsnorth's 4 Ps as it relates to American geography, because in a lot of ways, what you just described, the South is where we're from, and the West was always kind of a prayer. It's the most American prayer. Go West, young man.
Right.
Find your fortune, find your fate, find your adventure, find whatever it is you may be looking for. And that is, I myself have done that. It is the mountains called, and so I went. Kind of makes you wonder what's actually out there.
Right. Maybe I'm going to go walk around the marsh tonight in the dark, maybe run into a boo hag or something,
Yeah. Hey, something funny. Like I said, I was to research a little bit of my own history a little bit more. My ancestors are in a small town very similar to mine, and it's right next to a marsh. So turns out I very much have returned to form, returned to type.
You've gone back to the
small
swamp.
Small towns by a marsh. That's my family right there.
Interesting.
That's kind of cool. Yeah, the population is even similar in size. Like, how creepy is that, man?
Right. That's wild.
Just-
Well, my
yeah, it's
family's
cool weird. Cool weird.
from a big city. Actually, I recently found out that a great grandfather of mine was actually an Orthodox priest from a
Oh,
village. He
snap.
was a village priest in Romania, which I never
Yeah, I got a
knew.
lot of pastors on my side.
Um,
Those
um,
heathen Protestants. Just kidding.
on the cultural news, Thomas Pynchon, just his new novel was released, and I mean he's probably one of the last living great American writers of the
Cool.
20th century. It's called Shadow Ticket. I saw it for sale at for you guys if you're not familiar. Thomas Pynchon he wrote Gravity's Rainbow. He wrote the Mason Dixon, a lot of great novels. But the novel I really like from Thomas Pynchon is one that a lot of people think is kind of his lame novel, which is Inherent Vice, which was made into an okay movie. But I really like the novel Inherent Vice. But he just put out he's like in his 90s, I think. He's probably going to pass away soon. There's a new novel called Shadow Ticket, which I'm probably going to read. So we'll talk about that very soon because I
Let
think
me know when you read it. I'll pick it up.
Yeah, I'll probably start it soon. I got to finish Chasm City. I still need to finish that. We're gonna finally get around to inviting some guests, man. In my email, my email, I'm getting swamped with like people wanting to be on the show, right? And I keep
nice.
on saying, yeah. I'll schedule stuff, and we've just been so busy. We've all been so busy that it's been difficult to like. I don't. It's not that I don't want to invite people. Is that when I invite somebody, I really want to give them the courtesy of being able to fully research and read their work, and I really like ask interesting questions that are pertinent. And I've been swamped with work and playing Hunt on Xbox and all kinds of taking care of going to church, basically what I've been doing. I actually beat my record this Sunday, right? I don't know if Jamie's still in the chat, but we actually stayed at church until like 5:30 p.m. which is like our record. We tend to beat it. We're not, for you guys that aren't Orthodox, we don't really do church for that long, but we just basically hang out and have deep theological conversations with the priest and everybody, and it's a wonderful time. And we're just sitting around having coffee, and it's 1 p.m. and then all of a sudden it's 5:30 and we're still having these deep conversations, and I'm like, oh well, I guess we'll go home when it's dark. But yeah, so maybe I'll try to leave church a little bit earlier next Sunday and spend some time sending invites to people. But all right, guys, Phisto, everybody, good night. It was wonderful having you guys on again. Oh, for all you listeners, starting next week, because of Phisto's ever-changing schedule, we're going to be switching the show to Wednesdays. All right, we haven't decided on the time yet. You tell me the time, but we're switching to Wednesdays instead of Tuesdays. You guys got to be flexible. We have real jobs. I will proudly say that thanks to all you guys' contributions, it looks like I might break even with all my costs, and I'm able to pay Phisto his shekels for his share of the funds we split, right? But yeah, it looks like I might break into the black this year. I don't know. Maybe
once you go black, you never go back. Hell yeah!
Maybe at least it looks like I might be able to not have to pay out of pocket for all the streaming equipment and everything next year, which is really awesome.
That's so great.
So if you love us, go ahead and please subscribe. I really appreciate that because it allows us to, pay. I mean, technically I'm not breaking into the black because I still have to pay for internet and electricity and, the time, but it's not about
money,
guys.
Just money. It's money.
It's just money.
It's the machine's mammon. Who cares?
Yeah.
Who cares?
Even if none of you guys subscribed and none of you guys threw any money our way, God provides. Okay. Consider the birds and all that. And it doesn't matter.
Joke's on you, machine. I'm using all your money just so then that gives me more time to pray for God.
That's right. But if we did make a lot of money, we could do episodes every day. So
every day. And then we could just talk about how to murder the machine. Yeah, it's perfect.
Right. So fight the machine by sending us some money, guys.
Yeah. Send us money. We promise to blow it on things that only undermine everything.
The machine. More books.
Everything.
More
throw a rock in the air, you'll hit some retard that needs to shut up. It'll be
I am
fantastic.
thinking of putting together like a bibliography of books that I think
Ooh.
everybody should read.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I did.
Ooh,
There
you know
is.
what? You're gonna
Go ahead.
the bibliography. So that digital Minuteman thing that I've been thinking about.
Mhm.
I've essentially put it on hold. I have a pre outline of the essay I want to write for multipolarity, but that bibliography would be for my class, and it would absolutely be like Younger and Kingsnorth and like all this stuff, just to be like, this is the reality that you're in, and you need to
Right.
figure out where you're going, because if you don't, you will be assigned a place in the cube, and it's
Right.
probably going to be taking it up the butt from a dildo machine. So you probably don't want that. You probably don't
Yeah.
want that. You want a
Well,
choice in what
What we
happens.
don't, what we, what Paul Kingsnorth does not mention is that the machine is a sex machine, but
Yeah.
it's a genderless sex machine that just has its way with you. And
Yes, and by sex we mean rape. It
yeah,
straight up just rapes you. It's just rape
yeah,
all day, every day until you're dead.
it's like a
Yay, transhumanism!
it's the
But I mean, that's what the Borg is. But that's what the
true,
Borg is, man. I
true.
mean, that's like, look, Best of Both Worlds is a trilogy. You got the first 2 episodes where it's all of the Borg, and then it's Picard freaking trying to put his ship back together back in France. Which, where does he
Right.
go? He goes home. He goes home to the vineyard. And he
That's
gets
what
his ass
exactly
kicked by his brother. And he gets his ass kicked by his brother. There it
right.
is. He's
That's
done. He's
true.
good.
Right.
Yeah,
In
man.
order for him to,
Ooh.
become human again, he had to go back to France and to
Maybe
the
that'll be part
vineyards.
of the bibliography too. You got to watch 3 episodes, the 3 greatest episodes of Star Trek. You
I,
don't have to watch any of the others.
I actually think that the last one is really good. The last episode of Star Trek Next Generation,
Oh,
the finale.
the Yesterday's Enterprise.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Well,
Yeah.
the finale of the show, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
the finale show, yeah. Where it's
yeah.
like
The one
three
where he plays
different.
poker at the end. Yeah,
That's really a good
that's
one.
a good one. That's a good one.
But there is, if you guys are interested, there is a older
Anyway.
episode called 5 Novels, I believe, which I go over the 5 fiction novels I think are fantastic, and I kind of like they're kind of like my, you know, what I consider my inspiration for my own writing. And if you look at that episode, and there's also an essay tied to it, like it lists like the 5. I go in pretty good detail over my 5 most influential novels to me. Not including any Dostoevsky. I left Dostoevsky because Dostoevsky's a given, so I kind of left the classics out. They're more
Yeah, that's
contemporary
just kind of
novels,
holy. Yeah, 100%.
right? And that's really good. But I think I'm going to do an episode, or at least a list, on a lot of nonfiction work in the kind of in the vein of Paul Kingsnorth, of what I think is, kind of critical to my worldview. I would definitely, if you're interested in stuff right now, I would definitely include Dr. Zachary Porcu's book that we talked about when he came on the
Oh yeah,
episode. Right, Journey to Reality, which I think is a
there you go.
fantastic book. And Journey to
That should probably
Reality,
that should probably be. Oh, Mere Christianity and Journey to Reality. Those should probably
yeah,
be in the bibliography as well.
right, absolutely. But Journey to Reality could be could go, it's a very complimentary book to Paul Kingsnorth's book,
Yeah.
So I think they're very good together. All right, guys, but it's already 8:12 p.m. here. It is past Phisto's bedtime by 12 minutes.
Yeah.
He is
Yeah,
turning
I
into a
gotta go to
pumpkin.
sleep. Yeah, my lower half is already mutated into things that I would
Yeah,
find
horrors beyond human comprehension. He's basically,
violations of Substack terms of service.
yeah.
So yeah.
So good night, guys. We'll see you next week, all right, for another great episode. And this
Hey, guys.
episode will be edited and it'll be out for everybody else that missed it. And remember, guys, rage against the machine. All right. Good night.